Yeah, I'll bring some caffeine next time, so. I know Dave could have caffeine right at bedtime and still go to sleep, so. All right, it is 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started today. If you want to open your Bibles, I know not everyone has been here. We have some that are back in town. It is Matthew 25 is where we're at tonight. If you'd like to follow along. We're in a section of the book of Matthew that covers really just 1 week of his life, but it's actually the part of his life we know the most about, which is kind of interesting. That last week is so important. All the conversations that lead up to the cross, starting when he enters Jerusalem back in chapter 21, and kind of working his way really through conversation after conversation. His enemies keep trying to bring one thing or another against him, and their arguments fail. And eventually they can't fight him anymore, so they decide to secretly plot to kill him. And last week, actually really the last 2 weeks, we spent some time in chapter 24 talking about when the temple was going to end up being destroyed and kind of the Jewish way of life as they were used to it was going to come to an end. That was going to happen because as a whole, the nation of Israel had rejected God. But he was warning Christians so they could be safe when that happened, that Christians could get out of there. And all of that leads to today's discussion, which is the idea of being ready. So it's parable after parable about being ready. It applies to them when they were talking about when Jerusalem would be destroyed. It applies to really anybody in any stage of life where you are. You always got to be ready. The Bible tells us in 2 Peter that we don't know when the Lord's going to come back. It'll be like a thief in the night. Just like here, they didn't know when Jesus was going to come and destroy Jerusalem. It's going to come like a thief in the night. And because you don't know, you have to be ready. So this is very practical, and we could debate whether this is final judgment talk or, their particular judgment. But honestly, the point is the same either way. Be ready. So the last parable we talked about was the beginning of chapter 25. We ended our class on that. We have these 10 virgins or bridesmaids, and there are 5 of them that are wise, 5 are foolish. We learned a couple of lessons from these. What made the wise virgins wise? Yeah, they prepared ahead because they didn't know how long it was going to be. They brought more than enough oil instead of just enough, right? And the foolish ones and the wise ones alike, they all kind of fell asleep, right? They didn't know when he's coming back. They didn't know when this party was going to start. And all of a sudden there's a shout. We know that the bridegroom is in town. We talked a little bit about their traditions back then last week. When he shows up, he goes from one house to the other for the official ceremony to kind of commence. And in this particular case, if you didn't have a lamp, if you weren't ready, they were spending all their time looking for oil, right? Instead of being there at the door. But once the wedding starts, you don't go in late to the wedding. And so this story, what does it teach us about, I guess, there's a couple of lessons that we sort of ended last time. I want to begin with this, reminding us. What sort of lessons do we learn from this about being ready? Good. Yeah, be prepared. I mentioned before the idea of when Rick Lanning, whenever he talked to me, he's like, always leave enough room to change a spare tire. So if don't plan on being there just in time, because there's a lot of things out of your control and you just don't know how it's going to work out. You could drive over a nail on your way to somewhere, and you may be planned out the perfect amount of time, but if you're not prepared, well, you're going to be late. But spiritually, though, it's maybe not a huge deal if you're 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late somewhere today, but it's a huge deal about heaven, right? There is no like, oops, I wasn't ready. Give me a few more chances. That's not how it works, right? Good. So be prepared, be ready. What other things do we learn from this particular parable. Rick?
Essential for them to integrate, right? And what I extrapolate from that is there are some things that are just so, one thing that is so important that you can't share at the expense of yourself. In other words, you can't give away your relationship with God somehow to let someone else have that. We have to internalize the gospel and make it our own. Now we can share it with others, but we don't give away what is necessary for us to be successful. Just to help kind of lift someone else up in that regard. So it's for all the selflessness, there is one thing, and that is our relationship with God, which we do not sacrifice for the preparation that is required for that relationship. We don't trade anything.
Yeah. And you can't make it to heaven and have sacrificed that. You're exactly right. I just want to give a couple of thoughts to that idea, because you can only get you to heaven. That is a hard idea to wrap around your brain when it comes to the person you're married to or you love most. It's a hard idea to wrap your brain around when it comes to your kids or your parents. You can only get you to heaven. But that's the truth. I mean, I can teach my children everything right and be the 100% perfect parent every day their whole life. I still can't get them to heaven. It doesn't matter how much I love the person I'm married to. I can't get them to heaven. Only they can do that. I can help. I can avoid being an obstacle, but I can't bring them with me. They have to do that themselves. In Romans chapter 9, if you want to write the verse down, I'll just read it real quick. But Paul actually says something kind of shocking, because he's so sad that so many of his fellow Hebrews are not saved, that he says in Romans 9, and verse 3, "For I could wish that I myself were accursed, separated from Christ, for the sake of my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh." He says, if there was a way that somehow I could take on their punishment and let all these Hebrews into heaven, I'd do it. But he can't, right? In the Old Testament, and I believe, if my brain is serving me correctly, because I forgot to write it down, it's Ezekiel 14. But he talks about even if these three righteous men, Daniel or Job, now my brain is not working. But Daniel and Job are two of them. It might be David. And now I'm going to have to look it up because I need to know. That even those three guys couldn't get other people into heaven. They couldn't somehow save the king for themselves, or the other people of the kingdom for themselves. Yeah. Noah. There we go. Yep. Okay, so I remembered the verse, but not the people in the verse. So I got half of it. So even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were there, who could they save? Noah, Daniel, and Job is the most righteous men in the whole world at the points where they lived, right? They can only save themselves. So this is an important point. Their faith has to be their own. And so you could tell someone what to believe all day long. That's not going to fix the problem, is it? Because sometimes we think if I tell it at them loud enough, then they'll do the right thing. If I guilt them enough, they'll do the right thing. But honestly, if someone doesn't want to do the right thing and do it for the right reason, if they're just doing it for me, that's not okay, because that's not going to save them. In the end, the 5 wise young ladies here, they could get themselves into the wedding feast. But the 5 foolish ones, you can't share your salvation like that. Right? Rick?
What's important about foolish words to take the extra necessary steps to be sure. And I think a lot of times that can describe a number of covenant relationship Christians who are willing to do so much, but then they kind of, whether through apathy, laziness, or maybe they just don't feel like it's that important, they kind of draw lines to how far they'll go. But this will be enough. And that's not
Yeah, I gave you 3 hugs today. I said I love you once today. We're all good, right? I don't have to say it anymore. Yeah, love doesn't ask the questions like, what's the bare minimum I can get away with? And so when it comes to our relationship with God, don't just be waiting to the last minute to scrounge by and do whatever works. I honestly, and I say this all the time, recovering procrastinator right here. So I put things off, and it's not good. In this life, you can somehow pull it off sometimes. I recall written on the top of a research paper in college, wonderful research, but clearly not the product of a full semesters of research. The teacher knew me and knew me well enough to say that. So I did not get an A on that paper. So clearly not the product of a full semesters of research. And it wasn't. He was right. I pulled together some good stuff in that week and a half right there. But it should have been a full semester of work. I got away with it, and I got a B on a college paper. I'm not going to get into heaven that way. That's just not the way to think, right? Another analogy that is used by Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, he talks about you need to run in such a way as to win, right? Compete in such a way that it's like you're the only one in the race. Like, nobody says, I'm going to go shoot for bronze medal. Now, maybe you realistically think, maybe I won't make it to gold, but that doesn't stop you from trying, right? Gold is the goal. You can be happy with silver or bronze or 4th place, but gold is where you're aiming for. And you got to think that way spiritually, too, about being ready, right? The next one is about, it's another analogy, right? This is the one about being prepared for the wedding feast, this great celebration. I'm going to read this next parable, even though I know for those in the room it is probably pretty familiar. I'm actually going to start in verse 13, because I think that's it ties the 2 parables together. This verse works well with the one before it and after it. Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day nor the hour. For it's just like a man about to go on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his own ability. He went on his journey. Immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded them and gained 5 more talents. In the same manner the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things, but I'll put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And also the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with the few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one also who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and I went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked, lazy slave, you knew that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore take away the talent from him, give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have will be taken away. Throw out the worthless slave to the outer darkness. In that place there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And once again, this parable transitions into another one. So, we're going to stop and talk about this one, but keep in mind, the story keeps going. So let's talk about the hour. The hour that they didn't know about, and as well as the hour we don't know about. We got to be on the alert, right? What was given to these guys? Talents. And does anyone remember about how much a talent is? Good? Yeah, so if we're going to try to put it out into terms we can grasp, what would you make 20 years? And average salary, not the highest of the high, but just what's an average living wage? So this is a good chunk of money, right? And a talent is a measure of weight. So you can think precious gold, like gold bars, whatever it would be that would weigh this much. So he gives the guy 5, he gives the guy 2, and he gives the guy 1. And why does he give them different amounts? What does it say? According to their ability, right? So, here's something really important. The master knows his servants, and he knows what they're capable of. Before we go any further, I want to stop there and say, God knows what you are capable of, and he's not going to expect out of you what he expects out of somebody who is in a different league than you. And I'm not going to say where you are. We sometimes have people say, I'm just the one talent man, and I think every humble Christian probably feels like they're just the one talent man. But even one talent is a lot. But God knows what you can handle. And he expects you to do something with what he's given you. Not with what someone else is given. And so your lot in life may be hard. It may not be very easy. God knows. So maybe we need to kind of view ourselves through that lens. Okay, what has God given me? What can I do with what he's given me? If your body's broken and you can't do certain things, God knows. If you don't have a lot of money, God knows. If book learning is not your thing, God knows. God knows what you're good at, and he expects you to use what he's entrusted to you, right? Go ahead, Rick. I like what these two good guys did when they were given their money. What does it say about what they did with it? Good. That's exactly where I'm going with it. They immediately went out and started trading with it. So they went out and did something with what was given to them. And the other guy, and that sounds weird that he buried it in the ground, but back in the day, before the safety of FDIC-insured banks, however safe that really is, they didn't have such a guarantee, and so you would. If you had precious metals, you'd bury them. That's why those metal detector guys are out in Europe, and they uncover like a Viking hoard of treasure, right? Because that was where they would bury their treasure to keep it safe. And then eventually people die and forget about it, and it just gets lost to the time and history. But this one guy, he puts it in the ground to keep it safe. But there's a really pesky thing that's always been true about money. What happens if you do nothing with it? Now, technically gold and silver are supposed to be pretty stable, but at least with the American dollar, if you had $1 back from the 70s, compared to then what you could buy and what you could buy now, do you realize, and I'm not trying to get economical or political, 93% depreciation from the 70s. Like, a penny, I don't know why we have pennies anymore. The only thing you do is the little horse at Meyer the kids like to ride. That's about the only thing left that a penny could even do. And if you do nothing with money, it can't stay the same, can it? That's a concept I want us to understand. If I just stay the same, I'm falling back because there's potential. And real world money matters aside, I know I had a sermon about this maybe a few months back about the idea of investing what God's given us. Okay, so maybe you've got kind of a knack for music. And you're like, I don't know if I could lead a congregation. I got a little bit of a knowledge of music. What can I do? You could seek out someone who's good at song leading. You could watch videos online. You can sing along to songs and get better. I know there's certain women at our congregation who ended up coming later in life, and they weren't familiar with our songbook and a lot of the songs in it. And so what do? They get recordings online and at home and CDs, and they listen to these things over and over again to learn the music to get better at it. They have an inclination to music, and they make the most of it, and they get better at it, right? That's using a talent. Now, what if someone said, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I'm not even going to try. I'm not saying every man has to get up front and lead songs. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, if you've got some notion of a talent, do something with it. Someone says, I don't know what to say. How could I ever invite my neighbor? I'm just scared to death to speak up to somebody. Okay, join the club. That's a lot of people. But if you believe the word and if you love people enough, then you're going to find ways to start growing in that, right? Do a dry run. Practice with a Christian. Like, work on it. Figure out, all this stuff. I'm not good at hospitality. What do? I don't know how to entertain. I don't know how to do this. It makes me scared to death. I'm introverted. I don't like strangers. Okay. Well, God commands hospitality. It's something required. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to get better at it? Well, find a Christian who's good at it. Attach yourself to them. Say, when you have someone over, can you let me help you prepare at your house? And I can see what this looks like. And you grow in it. Nobody good at anything just was born that way. There's probably some exceptions. But the best athletes, what do? They go out there and they just practice. And sometimes they don't practice the fun stuff. In basketball, they're practicing dribbling. I was talking to someone about how they learned to play hockey, and one of the first things they learned was how to fall. So they did. They put on all their pads, and they said, here's how you fall without hurting yourself. Here's how you get back up quickly. And that was their first lesson about skating and hockey. They didn't give them a stick. They just taught them how to fall. So do you understand? Like, in everything in life, we understand this. That it takes work to get better and to grow. But sometimes when it comes to spiritual things, we dig a hole and we bury it and we don't do anything with it. Let's talk about the success of the 5-talent man. What did he accomplish? Yeah, like 100% return, right? He doubled his money. He's pleased, right? How about that 2-talent man? What did he do? Did you notice the words are the same? He's not like, well, you did pretty good, but man, nothing like that guy who now has 10 talents. No. The percentage gain was what he was looking at. These guys, well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. They get the same commendation there, right? That's important. So sometimes in my brain, I think me compared to some great preacher, or to my dad, who I really look up to, or somebody like that. I look to a mature Christian. I'm like, man, this person, they did all this stuff so great, and I'm comparing myself to that. Well, no. God looks at you, what he gave you to start with, and what have you done with it by the time he returns. That's what matters. And these guys were both pleasing in God's sight because they doubled it, right? They made so much more out of what God had given them. What other thoughts and observations do you have about the 5 and 2-talent guy? We'll talk about the 1-talent guy in a second. Is there anything else that you guys want to bring up about these guys here? Okay, so let's talk about the 1-talent guy. Of course, he buried it. What was his excuse for doing what he did? Yeah, you expect a lot, right? You're a hard taskmaster. I was afraid. You have what is yours. Now, by the way, did the master disagree? You see what he said? You knew it. Yeah, you knew I expect a lot out of you. You did nothing. Now, we have to be careful with parables to think about there are certain points to be made. I don't think God expects more than we can have. I don't think God's a hard man to deal with. But I also do think God does have high standards for us, and God does expect us to grow. Sometimes people have this image of God as this grandfatherly figure because they believe, rightfully so, he's full of grace and mercy, that almost it's no big deal when they mess up. No, it is a big deal. Now, you can have grace and mercy, you can make it better, but God expects a lot. And he expects you to grow, and he expects better things. And this guy, he was afraid. He was afraid of losing what he'd been given. When we understand that everything we've been given is God's in the first place, we're so afraid. I don't know all the things that hold people back, their reputation, their family, their friends, relationships, acceptance and approval, jobs. There's a whole lot of things that hold people back from becoming who they ought to be spiritually. But none of them are good excuses when you really realize it's not my money to begin with. It's not my stuff to begin with, right? Joanne? Yeah. Absolutely. And I know God. God would have been happy if he made half a talent more. doubling your money, that's excessive. That's great, but but there was no progress. There's not even a try. There was not an attempt. And parents and grandparents in the room, you can probably relate to this. I tell my kids, the first thing you do, you don't say, I can't do it. Because that's their first thing, right? I can't do it. No. We can say, I'm having a little trouble. Because I've tried it, and I'm having a little trouble. Could you help me, please? We try to change the conversation instead of, I can't do it. Like, get a stool. If you can't reach this thing, try something new. Oh, you're having trouble doing this thing? Well, let's look at it together. But there's no effort. He dug a hole, he left it, he did nothing. And if you're a Christian and you've been a Christian for a decent amount of time and nothing has changed, you need to repent and get to work. Simply put, that's the case. Because you don't know how long you have left. And if you're putting off getting better at evangelism until you're done with your busy schedule, good luck. You're going to be busy till you die. There's always going to be a reason. If you're too busy to do your Bible reading now, you're not going to, on vacation, suddenly magically have enough free time to Bible read because you'll be distracted with vacation. And in retirement, you're not going to be ready for Bible reading. If you don't build the habits now, don't put these things off. Right? Now, it's kind of scary what happens to him, right? He gets thrown to the outer darkness. This phrase, weeping and gnashing of teeth, it's sorrow and anger. All of that mixed in together because of what happens. But he only has himself to blame. He was given time. He was told this is what's going to happen. Here's what's expected of you. And he did nothing with it, right? Any other observations, thoughts, points from the parable? thoughts. Harvey? Good. That's right. Yeah, God knows what you're capable of. God knows what you need to grow in, and that's what He expects out of you. We don't need to compare ourselves to everybody else, but rather, what can I do more for the Lord? I think you're exactly right. Dave? Yeah. 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 Go ahead. Yeah. Good. And God is fair. God is just. God knows this whole situation, who's done something with it. And He knows the one who's not. And He reacts accordingly to that. You know, it's powerful. Go ahead. Yeah. And it puts it in perspective when you think about what shall it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul. So people think, I got to do whatever I can to hold on to what I've got here on this earth. And it's nothing. It's going to be taken away. But the ones who truly get it and truly have what comes from God, we're going to be blessed so much more beyond measure. So understanding what does it really mean to have something according to the way God's looking at it spiritually, I think you're right. Rick?
Yeah, you started touching on what to say, the idea of verse 29 is citing the concept of stewardship. These people who have, I mean, everybody has. That's kind of what Jesus is saying, is even what that you have to take away from the second half. But if the one who is cognizant of the fact that I have, I guess the very next verse talks about casting the unprofitable servant. So the unstewardly servant here has failed to recognize what he has. And I think
family is just one of the many categories that fits into this spiritually, that God has given you something. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to make it better, make it more, grow it in such a way? And people don't have that view. Sometimes they hold on to family so tight that they give up on God and put family before God. What do you have at the end? You know? A couple years back, you guys may remember this, there was a local family that they asked me to come over because the matriarch of the family was dying, and when she was a teenager, she was baptized in a Church of Christ somewhere down south. But she literally didn't go back to church again when she got married, and her husband never went to church. Their kids, their grandkids, they had zero religion. Zero. And the family could tell you about fishing trips and camping and funny stories about when a dessert exploded in the oven. Like, they had all these great stories, but it was just so different than the funerals I'm used to doing, because there was nothing to it. You know what I mean? There was, what was the purpose? What was the goal? What's going to be the lasting impact? You know, I preached what I could, but it was hard to know even what to say. It's like, this might be the only chance I ever talk to them. But we see a difference in somebody who understands this life is a gift from God. This is what I've been given. This is my family, but they're not really mine. They're mine for a while. And it's my job to improve them, make them better, and push them on to better things. So family, your song leading ability, your Bible study knowledge, your prayer life, talking to people about the gospel, whatever, every single thing that God has given you, He wants you to do more with it. He wants you to get better with it. And there's this funny thing that happens in the bank with compound interest, that you might feel like at first you're just putting a little bit in. How's that ever going to amount to anything? But it gets the ball rolling financially, and it grows quicker and quicker and quicker. And the more that's in there, the quicker it grows. And suddenly, you have a whole lot more than you ever could have saved up on your own, because that's just how it works with investments. And I think this is kind of what's going on here. You can make a whole lot with what God's entrusted you. But if you don't do anything with it, if you just sit on that, we'll call it spiritual inflation, it's going to rob you of any value of what you've been given if you don't make something of it. So grow. And it goes back to that very first verse we started with, right? Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day nor the hour. Don't put off growth. Start now. Like any good investment, the earlier you start, the better, right? The next parable, I know we had good discussion here. I don't want to rush through it, but we'll introduce it. We have the idea of the sheep and the goats. And I've told you before, I got to witness this when I was in the country of Kenya. There was sort of a watering hole in a dry place, and everybody's herds and flocks were there together. They were all sheep. There weren't any goats. But then the one guy, because the guys were all chatting, their sheep were just mingling, and the one guy gives a certain whistle, and the other guy goes up like, ah, like he has his call, and then the other guy, he calls him like this certain name that he's got, and each guy has a different little call or a whistle or a sound or something, and it was weird. Like, you just see the herds, and they walked off. Like, there was no confusion, no need to keep them separate with the pins or fences. They knew where to go. This is one of those images where God is not going to make mistakes. His sheep are going to go to his right side. His goats are going to go to the left. This image, by the way, comes from the Old Testament too, in case you're wondering. And so God is going to make a division. Now, I think this did happen in a limited sense on, when Jerusalem gets destroyed. You're going to weed out who are the people who are truly faithful to God and who are not. There are those who claim to love God and to follow his word, but they never accept the gospel. And the city of Jerusalem is going to go down hard. Not one stone of the temple will be left on another. It'll be burned. The emperor and his general Titus are going to come in and just do horrible things to the city of Jerusalem. But God's people are going to be saved and protected. I think this applies very well to the end of time. We see in Revelation there is this idea. I know there's debates about what exactly it's referring to, but there is this concept of separation, of final judgment at the great white throne of God. The same thing of this here, that God's going to separate out his people from the others. What types of things get you on the right side? I do agree in principle, but in this passage, what are the things that got the sheep to the right side? Yeah. And he says, you did it for me, right? So it is giving food to those that are hungry, giving water to those that are thirsty, visiting those that are sick or in prison, giving clothing to those that are unclothed. And the person's actually going to be surprised. Here's the thing I want you to understand. The judgment day is going to be surprising. There's going to be some people that are so humble, and they're like, I don't deserve to be in heaven. When did I ever do all this good stuff? And Jesus is saying, you did it all for me. When did I ever do all that? And he said, when you did it for the least of me. So when you lifted the little kid to get a drink of water at the fountain, when you used courtesy to somebody that everyone else would look over, when you helped out someone in financial need that nobody else seemed to care about, when you found ways to be there for other people, the outcasts, those that are looked down upon, those kind of people, you might as well be doing it for Jesus, is what the concept is here. I mean, this isn't a new concept if you knew the Old Testament, right? What did he say about why to take care of widows and orphans? Because the Lord is their defender, and the Lord is going to take care of it if you take advantage of a widow, or if you enslave an orphan, or harm from him, or steal from him, or something. So don't do that, because God's their defender. God will take care of it. In the same way as God will protect them, if you help those kind of people, you're helping out the Lord. So it's going to be a little bit surprising, right? On the other hand, the goats, right? It's sort of a reverse of that. But the goats are also surprised, aren't they? I would have gladly fed you. I would have gladly given you my coat. I would have gladly given you water, visited you when you were sick or in prison. I would have done all those things for you. You didn't. You didn't even care about the least of these, so you didn't care about me either. So a couple of weeks back, we talked about the two greatest commands and how they couldn't be separated. This is the illustration of that. It is physically impossible to love God and hate your neighbor. You just can't do it. If you don't love and care for people, you don't love God. And it's not me that said it, that's him, right? And you're not going to go to heaven. You're not going to be with him in eternity forever, whatever that looks like, if you don't reach out and care for those that are most vulnerable. And it is funny because I 100% agree. You've got to be baptized, and you've got to repent, and you've got to live a faithful life, and all of that. But it's funny that those things aren't in the passage. I don't think the people he's talking to had trouble with knowing the rules or the rule following, right? Remember we just got through in chapter 23 talking about people who took every 10th leaf off of their dill plant and their mint plant and they gave it to God? I don't think they had trouble in, knowing the rules or even following the rules to the letter. But what they had trouble with was justice and mercy and grace and all of those sorts of things. Caring for your common man. So on the day of judgment, the things that you think might keep you out of there, not knowing enough, not being smart enough, not talking to enough people maybe perhaps, or not comparing yourself to someone else, you might say, I'll never make it. But that's not how God measures it, is it? And if you think, I'm definitely going, I do all these things right, that reminds me of that other parable Jesus tells of the publican, right? I give tithes, I fast 3 times a week. Good thing I'm not like that publican standing over there, right? Don't be that way. If you're going to get to heaven, it's going to be a grace that gets you there. It's not going to be because you did everything right according to the rules. Now, we can go back and talk more about this next week if you have other things, but do you guys have any other thoughts on this particular parable? Connie? Good. Yeah. Giving 100% of your possessions is a whole lot more than whatever percentage they were giving. So God notices the small details, and he knows what he's given you, and he pays attention to those things, right? I know we'll have a bunch of kids coming in a second, so we will cover more of this next week, but mainly get into chapter 26 next week. That's okay. Just to make sure you get it.
Okay, our first song is going to be Our God, He is Alive. I haven't sang this one in a while. There is beyond the azure blue a God concealed from human sight. He tended skies with heavenly hue and framed the worlds with His great might. There is a God, He is alive. In Him we live, and we survive from dust to God, created man. He is our God, the great I am. There was a long, long time ago a God whose voice the prophets heard. He is the God that we should know, who speaks from His inspired word. germ within his hand. Though men may search, they cannot find, for God alone does understand. There is a God, he is alive, in him we live, and we survive. From dust our God created man. He is our God, the great I am. Our God who shone upon a tree, alive was willing there to give, that he from sin might set men free, and evermore within could live. There is a God, he is alive, in him we live, and we survive. From dust our God created man. He is our God, the great I am.
I don't know how much you've been following the situation, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. I probably have followed it a little too much at times and had to just find myself turning it off. But there's been just some remarkable things, because I don't really remember a conflict like this in my lifetime. I mean, it seems like the Gulf War was over in a couple seconds. There wasn't a whole lot to some of these other conflicts. Yes, I know Iraq and Afghanistan were what they were, but it wasn't this every day, here's where the fighting is. Every day, here's where this thing got bombed. It just wasn't presented that way. And so this is all new to me. And it's the largest conflict that Europe's seen since World War II. But part of the thing that is kind of amazing about the situation, and honestly, I don't know enough about the politics to know what all is going on, who all's the good guys in every situation, but the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, has become kind of this folk hero to his people. And he's inspired great resistance, even though they're outgunned and outnumbered, just because of the type of character he is. And the U.S. had offered, you may have seen this, to evacuate him, like they've done other places in the Middle East, things like that. When there's wars going on, they say, hey, we'll get the leaders out, we'll keep you guys safe. And he's quoted as saying to Congress that, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. And he's down there in the front lines wearing body armor. He's going to see the soldiers and fighting with them. And when you see somebody who's willing to run to the conflict, well, his people are inspired. In fact, thousands of people are coming from around the world and coming back home to fight, because this guy's inspirational and they want to fight for their homeland. But when we see that kind of leadership, someone who leads from the front, I'm reminded of King David when he faced Goliath. There's one detail about this that I don't think we give enough attention to. Everybody's terrified for days and days and days, and young David is ready to go and fight this guy. And after the Philistine insults his God, we see this picking up in verse 45 of 1 Samuel 17. Then David said to the Philistine, you come at me with a sword, a spear, or javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of armies, of Israel, whom you've taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I'll strike you down, remove your head from you. I'll give the dead bodies to the armies of the Philistines this day, to the birds of the sky, the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's. He will give you into our hands. Then it happened, while the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. That verse right there, that last one, is what I want to focus on. Everybody else had been running away and hiding, even King Saul, who was head and shoulders above the rest of Israel. He was their mighty champion. And he ran away and hid in his tents every time Goliath came out and taunted. David purposely didn't wear armor. He's unencumbered by all that weight, but he runs quickly. This young man running towards a giant. Now picture you're hiding in your tent and you're like peeking out. What's going on? What is he doing? And then what does he do? He takes down the giant. One hit, he's down on the ground. Another hit, he's dead. And there's no wonder that people followed David, right? David had the kind of faith that allowed him to run into battle. He knew the Lord would be with him, and he knew he'd win. No, we need that kind of confidence when it comes to our faith. We've got weapons that are better than any anti-tank or anti-aircraft missile. These are reliable spiritual weapons. They've been proven by the Lord himself. The armor of God, a bunch of the little boys came out wearing their version of the armor of God a couple weeks ago. And they could probably tell you all about it. God says 3 times in Ephesians 6, that armor of the God passage, that you will be able. You'll be able to stand strong. You'll be able to extinguish the fiery darts of the enemy. You will be able to defeat the enemy. We need the kind of confidence that says, I don't want to ride out of here. I want ammunition. I'm ready to fight. Our warfare is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers that are forces of darkness. We're not fighting people. We're fighting the devil himself and all of his minions. But God says, you will be able to win. I've given you what's necessary. Do you believe that? If you're here and you're a Christian today and you've not been confident this week, let me tell you, have that confidence of David. Run towards the battle, because if you are well armed, you will be able to stand firm when he comes at you. And if you're not a Christian, I want to give you the confidence to where you can face whatever life will throw at you, whether it be a giant or a whatever. God will be with you. He wants you to become a Christian, to be part of his army, to fight with him on the winning side. Victory is assured. The major blow has already been dealt on the cross. Victory is going to happen. Which side are you going to be on? If you'd like to become a Christian, our baptistry up there is warm and ready to go. We can wash away your sins in the waters of baptism. You can repent, make things right with God, and live your life in his army. If there's any way we can help you to make things right with God, let us know how as we stand and sing our invitation song.
Down at the cross where my Savior died, down where for cleansing from sin I cried, there to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name, glory to his name, glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. I am so wondrously saved from sin. Jesus so sweetly abides within. There at the cross where he took me in. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. Oh, precious fountain that saves from sin, I am so glad I have entered in. There Jesus saves me and keeps me clean. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. fountain so rich and sweet. Cast thy poor soul at the Savior's feet. Plunge in today and be made complete. Glory to